The year is 1481, and you're walking the streets of Venice. You can feel the stone beneath your boots, the tight belt around your waist, braces with retractable concealed blades firmly attached to your wrists. Your cape and robes flow behind you as you move, and you can feel the weight of your hood pressing down as it conceals your eyes in shadow. You smell the canals, see the sun reflecting off of their water, and hear the gondolas move through them and under the many bridges of the city. A breeze hits your face. You hear tradespeople peddle, doctors go on and on about leeches, and courtesans coquette with potential clients. All people, all going about their daily work. But you are not one of those people. Their daily work is not your daily work, and you're not just a traveling visitor either. You are on a different kind of mission. You are a member of a secret organization that works towards safeguarding the free will of all humanity. You call yourselves assassins. Your natural and sworn enemies, Templars, conspire against the good people of Venice. You are here today, among other things, to try and put a stop to all that. You move through the streets in search of information, in hopes of learning your enemy's nefarious plans, when all of a sudden you see white lines. They look ethereal and ephemeral. They are clearly not of this world. They pierce through the air and the people around you with mathematical precision. They trace buildings, streets, random objects. You try and move toward them, but time appears to be slowing down. Something is wrong. There is glowing white light in the distance, but you can't seem to reach it. Something won't let you. You press on, stubborn, but light only intensifies. Time appears as if it is grinding to a halt. You desynchronized. Now, there's nothing but you and an endless white room. Lines all around. If I had to sum up the rough outline of the fantasy Assassin's Creed offers by referring to a single image, I would probably choose an image of Ezio in the Animus loading room. It is the moment where the Animus loaded in your ancestor's body at a particular moment in their life, but is still loading in the environment they found themselves in at that time. It is also one of the most elegant and most narratively justified loading screens. The memory corridor. So, in a very real way, faced with the imagined self-imposed task of showing you the fantasy of Assassin's Creed in just a single image, I would choose an image of one of its loading screens. Why? Because in Assassin's Creed you aren't an assassin from 1481, or any other year for that matter, at least not outside of the 21st century. You are in a machine called the Animus, a machine that lets you relive the memories of our ancestors. But in order to do that, you need to synchronize. That just means work with the Animus. Cooperate. Do as it tells you. If you want to relive the memory of any particular ancestor, you need to do as they did, live as they lived, walk where they walked. You can't just stubbornly wander off into a street they didn't go into on that particular day, in that particular moment. Earlier you felt as if something wouldn't let you walk down that street and toward the light, but that was only because there was nothing to be let. It's not that the Animus doesn't want to show you that memory, it's that that isn't even remotely what happened that day in 1481. I say remotely because the Animus doesn't always show you what exactly happened either. Instead, for what it's worth, what the Animus appears to be doing a lot of the time is approximating what really happened, more or less fairly closely to how it actually did happen. But in order to see that, to relive that, you have to follow the memory, allow it to happen closely enough to how it actually did, The closer you get in that regard, the more synchronized you become. But you can resist memories too. Choose not to follow them within the confines of what happened, at which point the animus, having nothing else to show you in relation to the date and the time of the event you are attempting to see, will cause you to desynchronize. Put more simply, throw you out of the simulated memory you are attempting to relive. This idea of synchronization and desynchronization, coupled with the ideas of simulation, genetic memory, and the machine that lets you relive memories of people whose genes you have access to is, from the perspective of narrative design, a genius solution. It at once explains all the many different ways people can play through any given section of any given Assassin's Creed game from a narrative standpoint, while at the same time staying grounded and being justified in how we believe memory actually works from a scientific standpoint. If anybody's wondering why we can't just simply see a video-like thing of the events encoded in people's genes, the answer to that would be simple. That's just not how memory works. Yours, mine, or anyone else's. That video, at least, would never be completely accurate. After all, how accurately can you remember the last time you ate? What was the exact sequence of events? How many bites did you take? How many individual times did you chew in between those bites? How accurately can you remember something that you lived through 10 years ago? Or 20? We believe that memory is usually constructed on the spot, and though it isn't entirely unreliable, it isn't perfectly reliable either. If memories were to live in our genes in the way the universe of Assassin's Creed posits they do, they would still remain fairly unreliable. Even if we could access them, they would be rough accounts of what happened, not perfect recordings. You would, I think, be perfectly justified in now saying, but this is a science fiction game. You're telling me there's a machine that lets me relive the memories of my ancestors? Such technology is far-fetched as is. Since you came up with such a concept already, why not allow for completely accurate and singular viewing of such memories? But this is exactly one of the reasons why this solution is so genius. It stays somewhat grounded, while at the same time retaining the ability to explain why you and I, while playing through the same section of any given game, though we essentially end up doing the same thing in the end anyway, played a bit differently along the way. Maybe while you were tailing someone in-game you took to the rooftops, while I strolled through the streets. Ezio might have done both, or neither, but all three of us tailed the same person through roughly the same space. Few other games, if any, can explain with such efficiency the variability in gameplay, while retaining narrative justifications from within its own world, for its own world. If you're intimately familiar with the games, or at least played the first mainline 5, you will know that by the 5th, roughly 5 distinct fantasies reveal themselves. One has to do with being an assassin as conceived by the fiction of these games. One involves fighting a secret war against a secret organization. One with unraveling the quote-unquote true history of the world. And one with saving the world from an ecological catastrophe. One, of course, we've just talked about. Reliving lives of people from the past via machine and software. There are, of course, more discrete and even more obvious fantasies that make up the fantasy structure of these games, but the 5 I just mentioned certainly stand out the most and are most important for us at the present moment. The ones I've mentioned also intertwine, overlap, and intersect. And while every single one of the fantasies I mentioned can, in theory, also exist independently from one another, the creators of Assassin's Creed chose to make the one involving the Animus the catalyst for all, or at least most others. Given how the games are written, at least to my mind, almost nothing that actually happens in the games that is of any real consequence cannot happen if it is not facilitated by the fantasy of being able to relive the lives of people in the past. In other words, if it's not in some way facilitated by the fantasy of the Animus, it's as if it isn't Assassin's Creed. There is much to be said here, of course, in terms of aesthetics regarding hooded figures, freedom of movement, and historical dressing, and that is nothing to say of hidden blades. But I would like to leave the analysis of such matters for later videos. Such elements are present in other video games as well. On the other hand, I know of only one that needed to very carefully, and for whom it was so important to answer the following aesthetics question. How do I represent simulated memories? Ubisoft, it seems, does and does not have a singular answer to this question. Ideally, the solution is always the same. Visually, not so much. No matter which Assassin's Creed you're playing, every memory you play through is restricted not by realism, but by the idea of being reconstructed, or is it constructed, or both, out of biological information through a digital lens. The medium through which you are viewing memories is always facilitated by silicone and code, and that is what Ubisoft leans into every time, and rightfully so. But what does that look like? In the first game, the visual signature of the simulated environment leans into mist and fog, with vague references to organic biology. This makes sense, given that we usually refer to distant memories, or something that is very difficult to remember, as foggy, as if we're viewing the past through a veil of mist. The vague references to organic biology make sense as well, especially given the initial premises in the fiction of the technology of the Animus. In the second game, the environment is far more abstract. It is pristine and structural, architectural even. You can hear the world building around you as the Animus loads in the appropriate memory. This makes sense as well, especially given the general ideas and thoughts that enter our minds whenever we think of 15th century Italy, and that is, after all, the historical setting the second game focuses on. But for example, in the fifth game, the simulated environment is entirely distinct and neutral. It has no specific visual signature outside of pure abstraction, at least not one that I can notice. The best that I can do is say that visually it followed the trends that were popular at the time. So in this area of trying to represent this simulated environment, the memory corridor, the basis for how viewing memories and reliving them works, ideally, we remain consistent. Visually, we experiment. Even the Animus itself, the machine that makes it all possible, keeps changing its look. One thing that ties in all these different iterations is the simple idea of digitization. That is the thing that holds it all together. Because of that, the solution is simple as ideas go, but aesthetically fairly flexible, and because of that, almost always extremely effective. You may think, when you think of Assassin's Creed, first the white hoods, Renaissance masks, frontier snow, or even ancient Greek columns. But the aesthetic core of these games is grounded in simulation. The hoods, masks, snow, and columns you always see through a window, and that window's view is made out of ones and zeros generated by a machine. The window itself is ones and zeros. That is why the aesthetics of Assassin's Creed isn't primarily the aesthetics of historicity, but the aesthetics of technology. The former follows the latter. It is, however, the unique blend of these two types of aesthetics that gives each game in the series its unique aesthetic appeal, while at the same time supporting its, to my mind, central, or at the very least most important, and unique fantasy. Everything I've said so far, of course, has very little or nothing to do with what reliving these memories looks moment to moment, and the fantasy that involves that aspect. That's one of the things that I hope to explore in one of the future videos.